Hello and welcome to another episode of Yalla, the podcast of Jewish students. I'm Emmy, Campaigns Officer at UJS.
And I'm Revati, and I'm from the Glasgow JSOC. And today we are so delighted to be joined by Jodeci Joseph. Thank you for coming. So Jodeci is a motivational speaker and content creator who currently lives in Israel.
We are so honoured that Jodeci could join us today to discuss his Jewish experience. Jodeci, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me. So glad to be here. And yeah, thank you.
We're so excited to have you here. Should we start kind of at the beginning? Do you want to tell us about your upbringing, tell us about your childhood? Because I know it's not a kind of typical Jewish experience, should we say?
Yeah, for sure. So it's very interesting. I don't know how much people know about certain communities in the UK, but I'm going to start with my mother. I think that's the best place to start because start with my parents, start with my roots, start from where I really come from. And basically, my mum's from an area called Stamford Hill. And people who are very familiar with Stamford Hill, it's the Haredi, a very religious community. And my mum growing up was actually part of a very religious family. She was one of 14 children. I know it's a lot. It's like a classroom, basically. I don't know, it's like having a classroom in the house. And my mum didn't necessarily always feel so connected to the Jewish religion or like the way it was practiced in that community. So she kind of did her own thing a little bit. And she ended up kind of meeting my father, who's a Nigerian, who's not Jewish. I'll go into later a bit about my father and different religions, but he wasn't Jewish. And, I don't think it was the best person for my mum to bring home, to my grandfather, who's a rabbi, to bring home like this, not Jewish, but he was also Black person to the community back home. It wasn't the best it wasn't the best matchmaking prospect. And so long story short, she left the community and brought me and my siblings up in an area near Woolwich, where I didn't know I was Jewish. I was 11, so we grew up this kind of non-Jewish life. I thought I was a Christian for a long time. It was actually very funny, actually, because in my primary school, they had like a Christmas play, and they put me as Jesus in the play. It's quite funny. No, it's like foreshadowing in a way, because Jesus is Jewish anyway, so it's quite funny. But it was just very interesting that I had such a Christian life, lived, celebrated Christmas and Easter, and didn't really have any idea of our Jewish roots. So that's kind of a bit about my background about how I kind of got introduced and kind of how I got how that kind of started. And it was very interesting when she told us we were Jewish. I don't know if you want to hear more about that, if you've got any other questions, but I'm happy to delve more into it.
No, please do.
Yeah, so it was actually very interesting the way I found out I was Jewish. I don't know, people find out things, you find out, when you open your exam papers, you find out your grades. I know it's still a big deal, or, you find out, what the weather's going to be, what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. It's like the things you find out. But finding out one is Jewish, or like their whole identity, it kind of throws a lot up in the air. And when I remember, I'm the oldest of four. So I remember I remember this exact moment. My mum sat us down on this couch, and she said, "Guys, I've got something to tell you." And I was like, "Okay, cool, like what's new?" And she was like, "Oh, you guys are Jewish." And I remember just thinking to myself, like, okay, like it's just like a word. Someone threw a word at me. I didn't have any kind of context. It didn't mean anything to me. But not only did she say that we were Jewish, she said that we were going to now move to a Jewish area. She wanted us to move to Ilford, which was one of the fastest growing Jewish communities at the time, and was flourishing as a community. And we didn't understand. I was very frustrated and upset because I had all my friends, I had all my community. And now for this religion that I'd never heard of, we now had to get up and move over to this Jewish area. And I remember when I get there, like I walk into this Orthodox Jewish community, Jewish school, primary school, my last year of school. And obviously we saw these people. We walked into this on the first day, and we see these people with like circular pieces on their heads and like strings coming down from their waist. And all I could think of is like, where am I? I felt as if like a UFO had just dropped me and all my siblings like in this playground. So that's kind of like the start of my Jewish journey. That was my first experience with Judaism. And that's kind of where it all started.
I was really interested when you said that that you're one of four kids. And obviously, I mean, I know a bit about your background and where you've gone in your Jewish journey, which I'm sure you'll go into in a second. But did you find that there was a really big difference in reaction between your siblings? And like and since then?
I've never been asked that question. It's a really good question. I think at the time I was just so kind of engrossed and encompassed by my own reality that I think I didn't really kind of take so much notice of like my other siblings' reactions, because I think I had such an emotional reaction, like not wanting to go, that I didn't really have the space to like look around and see other people's reactions. And also, they were a lot younger. I mean, I have one brother who's like literally 11 months younger than me, and then I have two younger siblings who are a few years younger than me. And at the time, I was 11, so they must have been, I don't know, 5 or 4.
It
So
maybe
for
would have
them,
been less of a shock.
yeah, less for them, and even for my second brother, I don't think he kind of as much of a deep thinker and kind of as me, and I think he kind of just goes more with the flow. So I think I kind of was taking the brunt of all of the kind of the repercussion emotionally, and the backlash. I kind of took most of it. I think, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And when was it that you kind of started, I suppose, enjoying or kind of accepting your Jewish identity?
Yeah, so there's obviously, a big gap between that first experience when I was 11 and now. As you can probably see, there's a bit of a difference. But when I kind of went, I basically, that first year was really awful for me. I had a lot of, felt very isolated. And yeah, like the fact that I was a Black Jew as well, like a lot of kids didn't understand at the time. So I remember like a really it's quite sad, but I remember sitting on my own at lunchtimes for a while. That actually was weird, because the other day I was thinking about it, I actually still remember that as if it was yesterday. And that's what it's interesting, because trauma is kind of like, it doesn't leave your memory. So obviously that's quite traumatic for me at the time. The fact I remember it and I remember like everything about it. But then when I went to high school, it was King Solomon. It was a bit less orthodox, meaning like in Ilford Jewish primary school, my primary school, they had to, like, prayers in the morning and after lunch, and so it was kind of much more thrown in the deep end in terms of the gap between the culture where I was before and where I would have been at that time. But I think with King Solomon, it was a bit more going back to kind of the basics, because it was a bit more secular in the fact that we didn't have to do prayers in the morning, we didn't have to do prayers in the afternoon, and there's a much more kind of diverse range of Jews there, and I felt a bit more comfortable there, even though I still was kind of fighting that. But I didn't start to enjoy Judaism till I was at least 18 on a religious level. I would say throughout my high school, I enjoyed it more on a cultural level, because it was less. It wasn't about believing in God. It was more just like, we're Jews, let's get together and get some food and have house parties, and it was more like Jewish by culture and group, as opposed to Judaism by like identity in terms from a religious perspective. So I think I started to enjoy it to some degree as a culture, but I didn't start to enjoy it religiously till later on. If that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. And you said that when you were at uni, you were part of the JSOC at Hertfordshire, very involved in UJS. How did that experience compare to school?
So it was really, really interesting, because I had a lot of different experiences throughout school. To be honest, I kind of struggled a bit more towards GCSE A levels. I had a lot of stress going on, mental health and things like that. So it was very hard for me to kind of connect to like Judaism when you're not mentally like in an amazing place. It's hard to kind of connect to things in general. But what happened is that when I was 18, 19, like after I kind of had like a quite mentally tough experience, finding out my dad wasn't my real dad, like that was quite tough for me when I was 17. The pressure of like trying to fit in high school and then getting to A levels and like being deputy head boy and kind of like turning things around. And basically what would happen basically is that after I'd kind of had like this breakdown, it's actually interesting because the word breakdown from the context in which I was in meant a breakdown in my reality, meaning that a lot of the life that I used to live broke down in front of me. Like the way I perceived life, the way I interacted with life, kind of broke down. And then after that period, I kind of saw life very differently in terms of like pursuing a lot more kind of moral, like focusing on morality, a lot more focusing on the idea of spirituality. And that kind of led me on a journey towards connecting to my roots. And it started off more philosophically, looking at Jewish texts, and then I started to get much more inspired that way. And then that's where I got really close to my identity and became the kind of post-teenager, really into Judaism, really into inspiration, really into helping people. That's where all of that came from, basically.
I think that's so interesting. I feel like I've had a very kind of similar experience where like you have that whole like breakdown of everything, and there's a lot of at least in my experience, a lot of like questioning about like where do I kind of sit in the universe, or like now where do I go with these experiences and these lessons that I'm supposedly meant to learn. And I definitely even in the past few months, in the past year, found a lot more I think solace and identifying with myself a lot more through the Jewish community. Even like UJS has been a big part of that. Going to like JSOC events, being involved with like the European Union of Jewish Students, like just being in those communities, I think has definitely made a big difference.
Thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that you like empathize with that, because I do think it's more common than like people speak about, like this idea of like us like reconsidering and kind of analyzing and trying to see where we're going to go in life. And I think that kind of brings up a lot of identity questions.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And you go on like a bit of a search, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I think I don't know if you relate to this, but for me it was very much a thing of these are my values of this current form of myself, and where is the best environment for those values and those morals and for people to relate to them the most. And that's been this community.
Yeah, I definitely, I'd say more than that. I'd say that I didn't realize I had those values until things started to break down. And when you realize that you have certain values and you have a certain direction you want to go, then for me, my natural instinct was to start with this religion that's 3,000 years old, and that's kind of where I started. And I've always been quite a deep thinker, but it kind of brought out that side of me of like going deeper into things and being like into philosophy. And I feel like Judaism at the time offered me what I was kind of looking for at that point in time.
So did you explore different denominations? Like, how did you end up on the Orthodoxy path?
It's very interesting because I had the background already, meaning my mum is from an Orthodox family. My grandfather's a rabbi, actually. It's very interesting, and he was the head teacher of a very religious school. So, and all my uncles are religious. So, part of me, I think there was a part of me that already had this natural predisposition to religious orthodoxy. I think there is something strong when it comes to kind of tradition and culture and customs that runs in kind of genealogy and culture in human beings. And I think there was that natural subconscious like relation to the idea of like continuing what was. So maybe that kind of came out for me. And that's the reason I went to Orthodox to start with on a subconscious level. And then also just I really, again, like it was also quite available to me because basically I took a year out of university. Before university, I took a year out just to kind of recuperate. And there was what Jews do well is they do a lot of social events. So I found out that there was like a lot of social events which were around religious organizations, like these Jewish organizations that were Orthodox organizations were hosting these events for young people. So it just happened to be that these social events, which I was looking for, happened to be also centered around religious Judaism. And so I kind of got a bit of both, and I was kind of intrigued by the Jewish philosophy. And that kind of started me on my journey of like seeking and growing on like in a Jewish way. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I suppose if we kind of move your story up to now, so you now live in Israel, and I'm sure, we all know what happened on October the 7th. And I wonder if you just want to talk about how you ended up in Israel, and then be sort of how your life has changed, how you've been impacted in the last kind of 3 months?
Yeah, so obviously, like just before I got to Israel, I was for like basically there's a whole 5 year gap between going to university and then end up in Israel. There's like a 5 year gap here. So I'm just going to quickly summarize a bit about the 5 year gap. But when I was in University of Hertfordshire, so I was always known as the guy with the orange kippah, because I was always walking around like this black Jewish guy with an orange kippah walking around campus. So I kind of stood out a little bit, like just a tiny bit. And I remember just being quite an advocate for Judaism. And I remember once I was at a club and we were in the smoking area, and there was a guy sat next to me, and he was like, we were talking, and he said his grandmother's Jewish from his mum's side. So I started to go, yeah. So I was in a situation now where I kind of had to explain to this guy that he could potentially be Jewish, and it was very interesting because that's like it kind of like full circle because I got told, and it was just very interesting when you're in a position of leadership, in a position of representing Judaism, when you yourself are just kind of getting into it. It kind of gives you a certain responsibility to learn about it and to represent it in a good way. So that would cause me to want to go to yeshiva. So every summer I'd go to this place called yeshiva where I do Jewish learning every summer. And I remember I'd go to this place in Israel in like a vest, like a bright green, a luminous vest and some shorts and some flip-flops. And I'd walk into these rabbis and say, yeah, like I'm ready to learn, And I'd go back every summer because first of all, I love it. I love Israel. Like I always thought in England, no offense, guys, but whenever I was like in England, I was quite a bubbly personality. I always felt quite constricted, like as a personality. Like I couldn't really be myself in England, even though I did quite a lot there and I enjoyed it. But I felt like Israel, how amazing and all the energy and how everything's like just crazy. It really suited my personality, and so I loved going back there. And then it happened to be that one day I was in synagogue in the UK, and this girl was there, and it's very funny because in the synagogue you have like a mechitza, which is like a barrier between men and women. And I remember my wife now saying that she would look over the whole time, and I was a bit cheeky, I was thinking that was a bit cheeky.
That's
look
so
over
cute, though. That's sweet.
That's
that
a brilliant
sweet.
meet cute. It's like the start of a rom-com, honestly.
Yeah, start a movie, like
Yeah.
Looking through the gaps, trying to get a little peek.
Yeah, I mean, I was honored. I still, I'll take it. Like that's a nice thing from my perspective. And then I remember after synagogue, we went to eat, and she came up to me and she like introduced herself to me and started talking to me, and she made the first move, which was great.
Good for her. Good for her.
Yeah, she's proud. She's proud. She's not embarrassed at all. And then we found out we're both Chabad. We both come from the same denomination, and it turns out that actually my grandfather took her father into his bris milah, when he was 8 days old. So circumcision. So that was that was a bit of a wow. This is definitely something that's meant to be. Like cool. These things that it was really cute. And then we WhatsApp because it was just like the COVID. So she went back home, and we basically WhatsApped for like 2 years and like FaceTimed, and that was really cool. And then she came back to England for a month, and we got engaged. We dated in person for a month and got engaged, and then we couldn't see each other for 6 months, and then I went to Israel and we got married. Wow. So that's how I got to Israel, and I've been living in the same place, like in her parents' house, for the last 3.5 years. We've got like our own apartment here, so it's been amazing. I love Israel. And you wanted to ask about the 7th. That's how I got to Israel.
Yeah, and then how I know your life has changed, things have changed, how you've been impacted in the last kind of 3 months.
It's been very, very interesting because definitely at the beginning, like the first week or 2 or 3 weeks, it was very, very, very big shock to everyone. Like I remember, it was Simchat Torah, so we were like dancing in the synagogue, and I remembered all my friends like getting their army gear on and like leaving this like synagogue, and like everyone, there were just cars. Like no one drives on Shabbat, but like there were just so many cars leaving my community to go to this to the south. So like, and so we also didn't know what was going on because we didn't have any, like on Shabbat, we didn't have any communications on. We didn't have any radio. I had no idea what was going on. I don't know where were you guys, but it was probably quite hard for you. I'm saying from England, it's probably quite hard as well, no? Like,
we people heard we got to synagogue to shul for Simchat Torah, and the caretaker had printed out BBC News article that was kind of being passed around the community, and people were just like eager to hear kind of what happens. You know, I go to a very classic United Synagogue shul where you know, people pretend that they haven't been on their phones or watching TV, but everybody has at home. So everyone kind of had come to shul with some idea of what was going on, but because shul was lost early, no one kind of, it was a very uncertain time, and everyone was kind of like, okay, what do we do? We're supposed to be celebrating, but we know something bad is happening. We're just not quite sure kind of what.
Yeah. Wow. That must be very interesting from being abroad as well, because you're not there. But so that's what happened on the first day. And then the next 2 weeks, everyone was really traumatized. Like it was kind of like COVID in terms of like restrictions. It was kind of like COVID, but like on a very miniature intense level, not spread out, where for like 2 weeks, I didn't leave the house. Really, the roads were empty. The buses weren't running. It was like a very, very dark, scary feeling here. Everyone was I think people just kind of lost trust in being safe. And there was a lot of fear. And then what would happen is after about a week and a half, I kind of got fed up of like being like staying indoors because of fear. So I just went back to work in Jerusalem, and I would drive in every day. The roads were empty. And yeah, I think just over like the next few weeks, things just kind of got back to semi-normal in terms of like in terms of the people that weren't in the army and the people that were here. When obviously end time kind of heals, all these things kind of become less intense as time goes on, and then things kind of right now are kind of basically back to normal, bar the fact that there's a lot of people still in the army and people are dying, and it's very hard. If there's a lot of pain in Israel to do with the hostages and us losing people and our friends being in the army. But other than that, there's a sense of like the show must go on and people are carrying on and trying to just still stay positive. So that's kind of been like the general experience and feeling in Israel at the moment.
Kind of in a way, to kind of borrow a COVID term, it's kind of like a new normal, I guess, is a way to kind of put it, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah. I'd say not even on the physical level, like more on an emotional level, like a new normal. Like people are sitting with the trauma and just trying to put it to the side. But like just sitting with it, like because we have to keep moving in a way. Well, like, you know, I mean, that's the only choice we have. But there is that element of just an underlying pain, I think, just across the board. Like people don't really know how to deal with it emotionally.
It's kind of, I don't have time now, I'm gonna deal with this later, in a way.
Yeah. Or just like I don't have the even if I did have time, it's just not productive to sit and try and process what's going on right now. Because if I do, I won't be able to cope. Like that's how I think a lot of people are feeling. So we're just kind of being strong, trying to get on with things. But I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But like that, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
I feel like to a degree, it's obviously not all the same level, but that's definitely something I feel like a lot of UK Jewish students kind of had to deal with, because when it happened, it was just literally in the middle of a semester, and I think a lot of us as students have been trying to figure out how to, you know, deal with this trauma that like our friends and family are in another country, that, you know, whether they're like fighting as soldiers or whatever it might be, and yet we're also in the middle of having to do classes and assignments and deadlines, and how do you what do you put your focus on? And then especially from my experience as being like a Jewish leader on campus, it was like I feel like immediately we went into, okay, we need to protect our students, we need to put all these plans in place, we have to meet X, Y, and Z, and there wasn't actually any time to properly like process like this has happened. It just immediately became a managing thing, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask you guys like how how it's been for you, like being on campus, because I get a lot of bad reviews from the UK, and I don't think it necessarily represents like everyone, because I feel like I'm just hearing like filtered responses, but people seem to be quite frightened. I don't know if that's like everyone or it's just like more kind of what's being portrayed, like from the individuals that I've spoken to. But do you guys feel, I don't know, like is there a scared feeling there, or is there like a hopeful feeling? Like what's been your experiences like with Jewish students on campus?
I mean, Emmy can probably speak from a lot more of a across the
Yeah,
board sense. I can really only talk from a Scotland context. Yeah, I would say yeah, it's a very scared
yeah,
feeling.
yeah.
I think especially compared to probably the rest of, well, not the rest of the UK, but England at least. We're a very, very small community, let alone a student community.
Mm.
So it's a lot more, it's very, very easy for us to just hide away, not let anyone see us. Um, which is good and bad. It means, I mean, I guess in some ways it means that we're safer, but it also means that there's just a much louder voice that's very much against us, that just continues to be amplified and continues to be like supported by institutions and everything. So
I think on a kind of wider level, we see a real mixture. The example I like to use is so I have a younger brother who's at Bristol, and Edward, the president of UJS, also has a younger brother who's at Bristol, but they've had completely different experiences. So Edward's younger brother is the JSOC president, and he has been run off his feet, so busy dealing with instances of anti-Semitism, various bad faith actors on campus, whereas my brother on October the 9th, it must have been, walked onto campus, decided that he was going to wear his kippah onto campus, and has had nobody say a word to him about anything. He even he was telling me this week I went to visit him. He's created the No Ham Club with a Muslim girl who's on his course, because everyone keeps bringing sweets and neither of them can eat them, and they've kind of had that kind of moment of bonding,
Oh
which
wow,
that's nice.
yeah,
that's
so
really nice.
yeah, really cute. So yeah, I think that kind of shows the kind of diversity of Jewish student experience, I suppose.
No, thank you for that. And it's really interesting because I don't speak to so many people from England. I've still got my friends, but like more like the student population. It's been a
Mm.
while, so I really appreciate you guys giving me insight, because it's like just it's good for me to know. I kind of was very involved in that world, so I can't imagine how you guys are feeling, because I remember that, when you're in that age in university world and with so much going on, and it's like it's hard because you're kind of in between like teenagehood and adulthood at that point. So it's kind of like people still finding their feet, and to have this going on and that they're being middle of campus, and yeah, like big applause to you guys, like for representing the Jewish communities, in these times. Like we need leaders as much as we can have. So it's been fantastic.
I wonder if we can pivot off of that slightly, what you're saying about
Yeah,
leadership. This is a big conversation that we have in UJS a lot, talking about,
yeah,
leaders on campus and Jewish leaders. And
yeah.
something we see a lot is that often many like Jewish students of color won't step up and be leaders. And I wonder if you want
Mm,
to talk a bit about, your experience being that, or
mm.
and why you think perhaps they don't feel empowered or able to kind of step up into those roles.
It's a really good question, because I feel like I'm just such I have a unique mentality, and I feel like I don't necessarily represent, even though I'm a person of color, like I don't feel like I necessarily represent like the views and voices of people of color. Like, because first of all, I grew up in quite a white community. So for me, I always say that my look on the outside is a very physical look, and my identity feels very different to how I look. It's really hard to explain to people, because it's like I might look like a person of color, but I actually don't feel necessarily like really connected to my skin color. I mean, like I know I mean, I see myself as just a Jewish person who's grew up in Essex, and like always was always around kind of white people. So in a kind of strange way, it's like I don't really it's not really a conscious thing for me that I'm darker, and so it's very hard for me to kind of speak on behalf of other people who are people of color, because I feel like I don't really represent their voice, even though I am. But I can just talk from my perspective, to be honest, and maybe that like will help, because I can't really talk about anyone else.
Yeah, please do.
But yeah, I just think for me, like I'm naturally like a very positive person. Um, I kind of just like wherever I go, I just kind of like don't see color as a thing, because again, like I don't really, I don't know, it's not really my mind. I've been growing up in a place where I kind of accept everyone. My mum was very, very loving and very caring person to everyone. So when you're not like that as a person, you're not really aware of other people doing it to you. So I think maybe there was one time that I experienced racism, but it wasn't even a Jewish person who was racist. It was like I was going to a synagogue, and a non-Jewish security guard told me that I wasn't Jewish and he wouldn't let me in. But it wasn't even the Jewish community. It was a very interesting situation. But on the whole, I was deputy head boy. I was like head of JSOC. I was very, 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 very involved in leadership positions, like across the board. I never had. I mean, again, like no one's going to openly say like I'm not voting for you because of this. You know what I mean? So I just think I didn't notice anything that kind of stopped me or held me back. The reason I think potentially people maybe feel like they don't really want to step up is potentially because they might feel not really represented because there isn't such a diverse community, and that's just the reality of the community. Like in the UK, it's always been a predominantly white Jewish population. If you go to Nigeria or Ethiopia, it'd be very different. It's just the way that the community is. So it's like a lot of the reasons I think people might not step up is because of just like a lot of the things that kind of are not really in their control. And obviously, I know UJS has been like they try and put all these emotions together, and they do really try and make everyone feel welcome. So I definitely don't think UJS is like all these, or from my experience, like a lot of these organizations are in any way doing anything wrong. Could they be promoting it more? But yeah, you could really be promoting so many things more as well. I think it's just about giving people those opportunities and then kind of encouraging people as well to kind of take those steps forward. But for me, I'm saying for me, I'm really, really positive, and I'm being honest. I've always had a great experience with UJS, the Jewish community, and for me, it was a much more of a mental. It was my mental blockage. Like I just didn't let these things hold me back, and they didn't. But yeah, so I mean, if other people, if people of color or people who are less represented in the community are listening, I wouldn't really direct this at UJS. I'll direct it more to other people who are part of these communities and just say, like believe in yourself. Like people don't, at the end of the day, really care about the skin color. They really care about who you are as a person. That really what comes across, your energy. Because obviously, if I was a leader, obviously it's possible. If I was the head of JSOC and if I was be able to do all these things and represent different communities and not have an issue, then it's definitely possible. And just have that belief in yourself, and don't give up, and don't view yourself as less or smaller than other people. Like there's a lot of people who tell me, "Oh, Joe, like, yeah, is it hard for you that like with dating and everything because you're like Black Jew in the religious community?" And to be honest, I got married at 24, met an amazing girl, and like never really had an issue. So it's a lot about, I feel, the way one like kind of perceives and like pushes themselves. Obviously, in certain regimes when it's like very clearly like you're not equal, then yeah, like it's different. But in a society where everyone's trying to be equal and everyone's very focused and giving people opportunities, it's very hard to not be given the opportunity if you really try and push yourself. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I feel.
Yeah,
I don't know if other people feel differently. I don't know, but I feel like that's how I feel personally.
I don't know, Revati, I don't know if you want to speak to your experience with that, if you felt anything similar, different.
I was gonna say it was interesting the story you said there about like a non-Jewish bodyguard, like saying that you weren't Jewish and like making assumptions about it. Because I definitely think that there is still a really strong perception of what a Jew looks like.
Yeah.
And it's very much so that's very like Ashkenazi, very like white. I hate to say it, Emmy, what you look like.
That's very fair.
Perception of what a Jew is. There is it's no surprise to me when I tell people that I'm Jewish that it's very immediately like, are you? And I'm like, yeah, I just thought I was. And I think it's interesting at the moment as well with all of the discourse around October 7th and everything, that perception of Judaism being a connotation of whiteness. is being kind of like weaponized to view it as like Judaism as like a form of supremacy, when I'm like, hello, Jews of color exist in various forms. I think that's actually why it's even more so important that we're having like Jews of color going into leadership positions to actually show like there is not just one type of way of what it looks like to be Jewish. But I think in my own individual experiences, I definitely have had those moments of doubting how Jewish I am, because
Yes, for sure.
I don't come across a lot of other, specifically in my case, South Asian, East Asian Jews. So when I'm in those when I'm in those own communities of South Asians in East Asian, there's a little bit of a, I think a little bit of a disconnect because they themselves are not Jewish.
How was it getting your leadership position? Did you feel any restricted? Did you feel like you were held back at all, or you felt pretty like proud and happy to go for it and welcomed and embraced?
It's interesting because it's kind of similar to you, I guess, in the sense of like,
Yeah,
I didn't question it. I was like, it's obvious.
yeah,
I'm very involved in activism. It was very like an obvious step for me. I kind of just put my foot in the door and was like, hello, I'm here, deal with it
yeah.
type thing. But then there are further conversations then, because I'm very open about being a Jew of color and talking about my experience of that. That there are a lot of then conversations I have with people following those moments where they come up to me and they go, "You're the first Jew of color I've met," and it's like they mean it as in a positive way, but it's a bit of like, that's not a. I'm like, okay, I'm the first Jew of color you've met. Congratulations.
What does that make you like? You get a bit taken back by that, like the fact that
Yeah, a
like
little
the
bit.
fact the fact that they said it or the fact that they thought it. Because for me, it's like I can't, sometimes from my perspective, I appreciate the honesty because they're thinking it anyway. And it's like a lot of people, that's what people judge naturally. Like, I mean, if even us, I don't know, you or me, but sometimes when we see things, sometimes we just our natural thoughts, even if we don't mean it in a condescending or negative way. Sometimes I use it as a platform for conversation. Like I'm saying from my perspective, it's interesting because it's like when someone says that, it's like, okay, like let's discuss this as an opportunity to discuss it and be open. The fact they said that to you means they obviously feel quite
Yeah,
comfortable with
no,
you.
it's definitely
Yeah,
not
it's very
at all from
interesting.
a malicious point of view or anything. It's always just
But it still makes you feel a bit
it always just makes you feel like,
maybe.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
like yeah.
yeah,
And then even further off of that, even like good friends of
yeah.
mine in the Jewish community don't realize that like my Judaism lineage comes from an Asian community. A lot of people, because I am mixed race, a lot of people assume that like the Asianness is with like Asianness and Judaism, not the two together. And then I have to be
Oh,
like, well, no,
interesting.
the only white in me is actually Protestant. Like nothing, not Jewish at all.
That's really interesting. No, it's very interesting. It's interesting the different kind of connotations there are in every community, and I think it's great that you're there as well, and you're able to raise awareness as well, which is great. And the fact that you're in such a good position, it is amazing. Like for me, I felt that I helped a lot of people because the fact I was representing and kind of in Judaism we have this thing called Kiddush Hashem, which is like representing the Jewish name in a good way. Um, and I kind of felt like I was doing that from like a kind of a cultural minority representing us in a good way. And I kind of felt I was like it was good to bring openness and lightness to different types of awareness, to different types of communities, different types of cultures. And I was really proud and very inspired and very motivated to represent us well. And I don't know, it gave me a lot of these things give me a lot of drive. I feel like
Do you, sorry, continue.
yeah, go on, no, ask, it's
I was
fine,
just
it's
gonna say, so
perfect.
you've not had any experiences where perhaps people have doubted how Jewish you are, or how you found yourself to be?
Yeah,
Because
I
sometimes
get it a
people
lot.
think I'm a convert, and then I'm like, no.
Yeah, I get that all the time. But but when people say it to me, like I understand it because I put myself in their shoes, and I think if I saw someone like me in my community, I would probably think the same. Would I say it? Okay, maybe it's not socially correct, but the fact he said it doesn't make it less or more right. That he would have thought, but he just the fact he thought it is something I probably would have thought if I was in his shoes. The fact he said it for me doesn't really change the fact that doesn't really add on to the kind of disrespectfulness of thinking. It doesn't change anything. It's just the fact that that person now actually probably is more innocent because they're not just holding it in, they're actually talking about it and getting out there. And they're curious, they're actually asking me. So I'm like, now I have an opportunity to have dialogue about it. So I feel like I'm in a good position. I see it as a very positive thing because then I'm able to just say, you know what, like actually I can see why you think that, but actually I'm not, because I tell them my story a little bit, or I'll say, that actually there is quite a diverse range of Jews. And yeah, I do kind of fall into quite a niche because I'm not Ethiopian. And there's a lot of Ethiopian Jews in Israel, and I don't look Ashkenazi. And so, yeah, I am unique. And so when anything is unique, right, naturally when something is not part of the norm, there is that question. And for me, it's not something that's like, I know it's just human psychology. It's very natural for people to question things that aren't necessarily perceived as normal. So whenever someone says that to me, I'm like, okay, that makes sense, because I'm not normal. Like, I'm not part of the normal connotation of Judaism, like, and what's perceived and how, and in terms of numbers, I'm not normal. If you look at how many mixed race Jews with a Nigerian dad and an Ashkenazi mum, how many Nigerian Jews and Ashkenazi are there in the Jewish community? Probably isn't many. So in fact, they're probably right by questioning me, because I'm not normal. And if they're polite or not polite, again, like in Israel, there's not really many social norms anyway. So it's not like, oh, like I'm not going to say this and I'm going to say this because it's not polite. There's no such thing in Israel. So everyone just says what they think. So that's kind of, it's built me to be a bit more kind of just open, and people say things just like what's on their mind. And so I don't see it as like it's not like they're saying you're this and therefore you don't fit in my community. They're just asking literally about my lineage because it's not so normal. And so then I just kind of raise awareness, and then we move on, and we're like close, and we're buddies, and it doesn't become anything. It's just an opportunity for me to educate and say that there are people like this, even though it's not common. And I tend to get really positive responses, and I get to foster really relationships afterwards. There's no like energy there. I don't know. What do you think about that? I don't know, because it's like, I think it's a little bit different to your kind of like approach. I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but I would love to hear what you think about like what I said. I'm quite interested.
I definitely agree with you that there is that thing of like, yeah, I mean, I understand the question. I definitely understand the thinking. I think I really appreciate that you lead with like a degree of like compassion and like and patience in that sense of like not immediately jumping to a deep end, which I don't do myself, to be fair, but I definitely know people who are in similar positions as me as Jews of color, who you kind of want to immediately validate your position that like, yeah, I'm just as much as a Jew as you are in this place, as opposed to trying to actually foster a conversation around that.
And I think, sorry, I know we're like keep talking, but I just want to say, like, I think Judaism, if I'm trying to represent Judaism and trying to be authentic, Judaism is very big about judging people favorably, number one, and also just being, I don't know, like just trying to be a kind person. And like, for me, anger and kind of like reactionary responses, I don't ever feel like ever help the situation, any situation. And so first of all, I try and judge people favorably. When anyone does anything or says anything, I kind of just judge them favorably and say, oh, they're probably coming from like an innocent place or a place that they're not knowing. And then I think, oh, so then let me do now that's judging them favorably. And then there's chesed, which is like doing kindness. So now I've judged them very favorably. How can I now do kindness? And the kindness is to like kind of talk to them and educate them and say, I appreciate why you think that, and it makes sense, and this is kind of what the reality is. And I just feel like I come across feeling better, the energy, the conversation's better, the person feels better, the person's actually educated, the person actually now understands and actually can pass it on, rather than me be like, oh, I can't believe you asked that and stuff like that. Now they've closed and now they're not going to be open with anyone else, and they're going to feel intimidated. And so that's kind of been my approach upon reflection. And I'm not saying it's right, but I feel like it's really worked for me. And kind of when I've done it, I've had quite good responses. It's been quite good for both parties. So.
Amazing. That was, sorry, I've just been listening to the two of you, absolutely fascinated. As you say, like, I look very Jewish. For listeners, before we got on the podcast, Jodeci went to me, I really recognize you from somewhere, and it's because he'd worked with my mum. And of course, because I'm Ashki, our genes, I look exactly like my mum did when she was my age. But I think Yeah, I've just been listening to you both, absolutely fascinated. This is such an interesting conversation. But I think my next question for you, Jodeci, is what like motivates you? Like you sit here, you have such like an amazing like approach to everything. You have, you know, this incredible mindset that you've been talking about. And then where did that come from? How did you kind of cultivate that?
It's a really good question. So I'm just like, it's a really, really good question. So I just want to kind of gather my thoughts a little bit. And yeah, quite taken aback by that. It's really, really appreciate the nice words. So it means a lot. I've been through a lot in life. And so first of all, just being in certain places and like being quite anxious a lot and being stressed about a lot of things for a long time. Life was quite like, was never really relaxing for me or enjoyable, and was kind of always on the go. I think over like the last like, I'd say year and a half, been a bit of a journey of just like doing yoga a bit more, and like just meditate every day, and just like much more aware of my emotions, and like how I feel about certain things and how I react to people. And I feel like just being more aware of my situation and who I am, and kind of what's going on inside of me has helped me a lot kind of navigate my life outside. And kind of, it's not really like I'm trying to be motivated, or it's not like I sit there and kind of force myself to be motivated or have goals to be motivated about. It's more that the more I like have compassion on myself and feel more connected to who I am and like the world around me, the more I want to live this life and like connect to everything that there is about this life, and what there is to do, and live in the moment, and just really embrace, like, I've got 2 children, thank God, and like I'm married. So like, it's like I'm just trying to live each moment. And even when there's stresses, it could be financially, it could be with the war going on, I obviously still sit and know that that's going on, but I do tend to just kind of like live a lot in the moment and try and embrace and try and just be nice to people, and trying to not react on anger, not trying to react on emotions that kind of come from places of like negativity or pushy, that I'm aware of them, but I try and just focus on, you know, connecting to the moment and being more peaceful. And that's kind of been my journey in the last year and a half, is just trying to be a bit more of a peaceful human being, trying to enjoy life a bit more, trying to relax a bit more. And motivation kind of just naturally comes because I have a deep desire to improve. I have a deep desire to grow. I have a deep desire to change the world, and that's kind of like, that comes through self exploration, and like kind of getting in touch with who you really are. So that, yeah, so that's how I've been cultivating it, really, like a lot of meditation, a lot of going inside and really sitting with the self.
And how do you find that balance between like motivation, sorry, not motivation, meditation rather, and typical kind of Jewish prayer? Because in a way, I think a lot of what I personally have been taught is that prayer is supposed to be a kind of meditation. And then how do you find that balance between the two?
When you say balance, you mean that prayer is different,
Yeah,
like
do you find that prayer is a different type of meditation? How do you view prayer as opposed to kind of meditation or sitting with your thoughts, I suppose?
Yeah, so I see meditation as sitting with what, being in the present, basically, like putting yourself in the present. So with prayer, everything in life can be a form of meditation, as one could say. Meaning, when I sit in synagogue, I can be just very conscious of the words, be very conscious of my thoughts, and like for example, during the Amida prayer, I would spend a lot of that time actually meditating, during that prayer. Like I would say some of the paragraphs and then I'd meditate for a few minutes and kind of use that anyway as like a formal meditation. But anyway, in general, I just find it quite fascinating, just like being present, like being with the people, with the community, watching what's going on, try my best to bring myself back to the room and back to the present moment. And that's what meditation for me is. It's just being where you are. And obviously there's more formal meditation moments where you're like 10 minutes where you're like doing breathing and focusing more on the thoughts. But in reality, you can be in a meditative state for all of the day. Obviously it's a very high level and it takes a long time to get there, but trying to be meditative and trying to just be more in the present kind of naturally gets you there. And so then it's not really like a matter of balancing things, it's just a matter of like applying that consciousness when I'm also praying. Like praying for me isn't like, oh, this is time for meditation, and then the rest of my life isn't. It's like, how can I be conscious and present at work, with my family, when I play sport? How can I be really there? And that's kind of like where the biggest struggle is, and that's where I kind of put the emphasis, and the rest kind of just fits in, like prayer and all these things. It just comes into that whole experience of trying to be more meditative in general.
Amazing, thank you. I think we're going to kind of round off here. We always end
I know.
Yalla with quick fire questions. So we have some quick fire
Sure.
questions for you. So first question, who is your biggest role model?
A guy called Sadhguru, actually. He's a very interesting Buddhist motivational speaker. People should look him up, but he's great.
Anything in particular we should Google? Any particular talk?
Sadhguru, Sadghuru, just like his main speeches on YouTube. He has a very interesting perspective on life and how to interact with it. So I find him very intriguing.
What song are you listening to at the moment? Do you have any music recommendations for us? Between just Spotify Wrapped.
I was saying I'm listening to your voices right now, but I'm actually listening to a lot of rap music actually at the moment. A lot of English grime. So I don't know if I'd recommend that to everyone, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it at the moment. I tend to listen to music in line with my mood, so I'm in quite a excitable mood at the moment. So grime seems to meet the need there.
Amazing. Now, would you rather take a bath in cholent or a shower in chicken soup?
They're not great options.
That's why it's a difficult question. We get looking at questions here.
I hate cholent. I really don't like cholent. I'm really not Ashkenazi. I'll take a shower in. Is it a shower in chicken soup? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually very easy.
Yeah.
I don't know who would choose taking a bath. Who would take a bath in cholent over that? I don't know who would.
You don't have to eat it though. You're just in it. It could be good. It could be good for your skin. I don't know. Very like
the hidden health.
Try it. Let us know how it goes. Yeah. Let us know how it goes.
Last question is, as you said, you're married. You're in a very lovely marriage, 2 lovely children. What would you say is what's your biggest piece of dating advice you can give to Jewish students? And by that, I mean me.
Biggest dating advice: be yourself. Don't have too many expectations.
That's so good.
I'll leave that open.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you so much for spending this time with us this evening.
Pleasure.
I've had a great time personally. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for listening, everyone. Please stay tuned for more podcasts and keep up to date via social media at UJS UK on all platforms.